Hi, I'm Luke Carlson from LS Carlson Law.
And I'm Irasema Rocha, an associate here as well.
Thanks for joining us. Today, we're really looking at the VDP program the IRS has recently rolled out. I'm bringing Irasema on because she really is the inside expert at our firm. She knows this area inside and out, and there's a lot of confusion with this new program. I'll lay the foundation a little bit, and then I'll have you shed the expertise that you have on the topic. So, looking back, with ERC, Employee Retention Credit, you had a lot of law firms, and we discussed this. A lot of law firms non-law firms came into the space, and really ERC mills. Companies that weren't taking it seriously, if you had a pulse, they would put an application in, and really what it was, there was a lot of fraud.
A lot.
Tons of fraud.
Tons.
And we saw it firsthand. We saw, individuals come in, companies come in where they should not have filed an application. And so there was a lot of internal conversation where what was the IRS going to do with these claims? Because, looking at it from a more reasonable perspective, these were good companies, good people, and they really got business owners that got swindled.
Millions of dollars.
Millions, because it's a complicated program in and of itself. So for the layperson, the business owner, he hears or she hears, hey, apply for ERC. This is a great program.
$26,000.
They talk to someone, they're persuasive, it's a salesperson, they submit the application, they get a check. They don't really understand the import of it. What the IRS has done, and I think they've done a very good job at threading the needle, is saying, hey, if you think that you've applied wrongfully, refund a portion of the money. And they do a portion because a lot of these ERC mills were taking pretty large chunks out of the ERC claim.
20%.
20% or more sometimes.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start with just going over the program, kind of explaining how it works mechanically. I'll let you take the lead on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it a little further back, and I like to think of it as the IRS's initiatives to curb ERC abuse. Step one was back in September 14th when they issued the moratorium on all new claims. When they issued this moratorium, they were like, hey, we're going to halt the processing of new claims, and we're going to implement new and stricter standards of review to help end this fraud. And then a few months later, they set up the withdrawal program. So, hey, if your claim hasn't been processed yet, you can withdraw if you do it in time and if you qualify. Obviously, there's a lot of parameters.
Right.
And then on December 21st, they issued the Voluntary Disclosure Program. And for these people, if you had an ERC claim that was processed and you believe you're ineligible, you're able to return the refund without being penalized or paying interest, which is pretty great. Part of the thing, too, is that you'll return 80%. And they did the 80% because of most companies were charging the 20% interest. Right. So they're like, hey, give us back 80% and you get to even keep the interest. So a lot of these claims, some interest payments were as high as $30,000. So they're even going to take the blow on that. They're like, we're going to take the hit, keep the $30K, and also you won't even have that additional 20% that you lost. Right. That won't be taxable as income either.
Right.
So that's another great benefit.
So walk me through this. So let's say I'm an business owner. I went to ERC mill down the street. It was in an alleyway.
Yes.
They submitted my application.
Skid Row.
Yeah.
Yes.
They submitted my application, and I received $500,000. So I hear about the program. I'm a little concerned. What is step one? What would you say? Do I just immediately send the money back? Who do I consult with? What does that look like? To cross your T's, dot the lowercase j's, because certainly you don't want to be a business owner who returns money where the money was rightfully theirs under the program. So how do you thread that needle? What are the steps?
I would definitely contact a trusted tax professional, and that's a direct quote from the IRS website. They say that all over there, just like LS Carlson Law. We're great at that. And have them assess each and one of your claims, because people don't realize the ERC is a summation of several claims. So if you got $500,000, it's really maybe 6 different claims that you filed. So maybe a few of those were correct and the others weren't. So you get a trusted tax professional to assess your eligibility requirements, specifically a lawyer, because CPAs don't, they're limited by what they can do. And a lot of the credit rests on tax code, so you want a lawyer to interpret, especially if you qualify through partial suspension, which is the impact COVID had on your employee hours or particular sources of income, and you really need a lawyer to do that. And then once you get that done, it's like, hey, I had 6 claims. I'm eligible for 3 of them. The other 3 aren't. What do I do? Then we would help you, or another tax professional would help you submit all the right documents that you need to do. And
So step one is really, it's almost a pre-audit.
yes.
You're having someone go in with a fine-tooth comb and go through and say, hey, these are every penny here is legitimate. This lump right here, though, is illegitimate.
Exactly.
So once that's established, let's say it's a $500,000 claim and $400,000 is legitimate. What do they do with the $100,000? How does the process work?
Well, you would withdraw that particular claim, whichever one wasn't right. Because a lot of the times, too, the error might have even just been a calculation error. Because, for example, the PPP, you can't double dip wages used to claim the PPP. So maybe you had the right to the claim, but it was calculated wrong. And then the reason why you should also contact someone is because it might not even be necessarily a withdrawal of a claim, but it might be an amendment to an amendment.
Okay.
So you really need someone who knows how to guide the space to let you know, because maybe you shouldn't return the 80%. Maybe it's just an amendment.
You were entitled to it.
Exactly, an amendment to an amendment.
So that's withdrawal. And that's someone who hasn't yet received the money. So that's, $500,000 claim that's outstanding, but you withdraw that accordingly, right? The other component, though, is someone who actually received the $500,000. They're sitting on $500,000, and let's say you do the analysis, the pre-audit that we discussed, and half of it is legitimate. The other half is not. So how is that handled by a lawyer?
Yeah, well, we would gather all the right docs and file all the right forms on your behalf.
Okay, so it's a procedure.
You're basically, they call it the Voluntary Disclosure Program, because you're volunteering for tribute, like in the Hunger Games. And you're saying, here's my claim. It was wrong. I didn't know it was wrong. And now I want to give back this 80%, because it also requires payment. And then a little, wrinkle in that is that you will still be charged some fees if you're unable to pay the 80% back by the time you receive your closing letter where they approve it. And in that case, they have installment agreements. So you will be assessed some fees, but for those you'll at least be able to.
And I can see a situation where a business owner thought that they had the money, poured it into the company, maybe reinvested, and they're not sitting on $500,000 or $250,000, right?
Exactly.
So there are payment arrangements that can be made with the IRS?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but in that case, you will still be charged some fees. But still, it's better than an audit. And the IRS is also vouching, once you accept this, we're not going to peer into your payroll returns, case closed. We're not going to go back and audit.
Clean slate.
It's a clean slate if you come. But that's why it's a very narrow window. You have until...
Yeah, let's talk about the window.
Yes.
How much time do people have to really execute on this program?
The end date, it started on December 21st, and the end date is March 22nd, 2024 at 11:59 p.m.
That's very specific.
To the IRS's, that's what it said.
Okay.
So you have, obviously, a prudent taxpayer would try to have this done as soon as possible, preferably before the March 22nd deadline.
Because it's going to take some time for the audit to occur, to figure out the numbers.
Yeah, anyone even, because there's so many moving parts.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why there was so much fraud in the space, because it is so easy to swindle in it. So you'd have to have someone thoroughly assess every nook and cranny.
So there's some heavy lifting at the forefront of this.
Yes, especially for business owners that own any other business interests, even if it feels unrelated.
Yeah, and that's aggregation. So can you explain aggregation briefly? Because that seems to be a topic where a lot of savvy business people, they still don't have their head fully around the aggregation process as it relates to ERC. So could you kind of walk us through that?
So the way that the aggregation process is viewed through the eyes of the ERC, it has the same rules for businesses with benefit plans, insurance benefit plans. There's rules with how much coverage you need to give and yada yadas. The way it works is I always like to think of it as a seed. Like a business owner or many business owners have many seeds, and depending on whether the percentage of amount, like if someone owns 60% of one company, 70% of another, they might be aggregated together as one employer.
So it's the collection of the seeds. And
Yes.
each seed represents a business ownership
Yes,
interest.
and then the fruits branch out into other businesses, and maybe you have a parent to a sub, and that sub will be included. And so it gets pretty entangled once you
Right.
have, I mean, some of our clients had like 55 entities.
I recall.
Yeah, so you had to make sure that you assess them all together.
Understood.
And even the small mom and pop, I'll even take my mom. She has a catering company, and she rents out her space, her business space for her catering company to herself and another business that she owns. They're considered one employer, even though that other business doesn't even have employees.
Right.
And a lot of places do that. A lot of business owners have that setup where they rent out to themselves or they work within themselves. So maybe they talk to their CPA and they're like, hey, my gross receipts, like for sure I had that 50% reduction, or I had the 20% reduction in 2021. And it's like, hey, did you include the receipts from the space you rented out?
Right, because that's going to come in and sort of modify that equation or that
Exactly.
or that number.
Exactly. So now, or people who have employees in multiple businesses, and it's like, well, you're capped at $26K per employee. And if you gave that employee more than one W-2, then you're limited. And that's how a lot of these swindlers did. They were giving like $1 million credit when aggregated, it should have really been like 300, taking into consideration all the double dipped employees.
Right. And, I think you're opening up this notion of really two things, right? You have the fraudster, the swindler, right, who is just maximizing credit wrongfully. But then you also have sort of this incompetent individual who just couldn't get their head around the complexity of it.
Exactly.
So it's one of two things, at least what we've seen, correct?
Yeah. And even some CPAs, they just didn't know how to do it, or they were too precautious, right? And then they told their clients, hey, actually, you only qualify for 1 quarter, but because they couldn't assess suspension,
Right.
they erred on the side of caution, which
really brought it into the legal. CPAs I thought did a brilliant job when it comes to strictly financial, black and white financial elements. But when you look at ERC, there's a very broad category of legal interpretation, code interpretation. And I think that's the distinction you're drawing.
And actually, something I did want to touch on, because no one realizes, they were swindled by these companies that told them that they qualify because they were impacted by COVID. But that assessment is very, very thorough and requires substantiation. You can't just say, oh, well, my employees had to wear masks. So
and
that
it was annoying
impacted them.
and we were impacted.
Yeah. Or even the OSHA guidelines. A lot of people cited OSHA without citing another source. And the IRS, I think it was in October that they sent out a memo about how OSHA guidelines don't meet the government rule requirement, because it has to be a mandatory rule from the government. It can't just be a suggestion or like a type of a guideline. It has to be something that said you had to comply with this order and it impacted you from operating. And then you need to be able to look back at your documents and show that impact.
Correct.
With the numbers.
'Cause I know you and your team spend a tremendous amount of time just gathering orders and just really crossing your T's and dotting your lowercase J's.
Exactly, because the order had to be in effect at the exact same time that the payment was made of the wage. So you had to have an order that was in effect, like these pay dates, every pay date, and you had to be able to point it out, and it took a lot of work, but that's how you get the suspension.
Right. A lot of intellectual rigor, if you will.
It was fun, though.
Yeah. I know
Some fun times.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think you did a great job just kind of going over very high level what this new program is. I think, and you'll agree, it'll be very interesting to see how this shakes out on the back end.
Yes.
I actually have a question.
Oh, we got Marty as well, our producer. Marty.
Jumping in.
So this whole thing seems rather bizarre that the IRS is coming in and say, hey, are you sure? Are you sure that this is filed correctly? The fact that they are saying this now, that you can withdraw or you can change your mind, if you will, kind of seems like a flag that they're going to be doing something somewhat substantial in terms of consequences should the business owner decide not to go through with withdrawing.
Some foreshadowing, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So to that end, do we know what the consequences are if someone decides, I'm just going to let this thing ride? What are the potential consequences? Has the IRS been clear about that?
Well, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that is such a rare opportunity. This voluntary disclosure program is unprecedented, and it's very strange that the IRS is showing this much mercy. Obviously they had to balance it with all the fraud in the space, but it is unknown for the IRS to extend such like graciousness to taxpayers like
Agreed.
that.
I agree with that.
It is very worrisome too, right? Because it's like, whoa, if they're being this nice, what are they doing behind closed doors? Just sharpening their knives, ready for war.
This is your last chance. That's what it. That's what it reads like to me.
Well, to your point, and I think what we're really talking about is the tremendous amount of audits that we anticipate after this program ends.
Right, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, and I think we've seen things in the news that would support that, or just internally amongst other professionals that we do anticipate a tremendous amount of audits in this space, and rightfully so. Given the amount of fraud, given the amount of incompetence, I would not be surprised that they are absolutely ramping up currently, and they're giving good business owners the opportunity to right the wrong that someone else essentially had happen. And afterwards, though, I don't think that it's going to be as gracious as you put it.
No. I mean, as of September, thousands of claims were referred to audit. I don't know how many thousands. They just said generally thousands have been referred to audit, and hundreds were pending criminal investigation. And last I checked, it was maybe like 12 convictions had occurred at that point.
I think that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and that was in September, and they haven't talked about it since. All they've done is take these other initiatives to help people. And when you call the IRS, they don't know. I've spoken to some agents. They're like, we don't know. They have like a small team assessing claims, and they are not processing them like before, where everybody could kind of review them. Now they're making like, it reminds me of Law and Order SVU, where they're like an elite group known as the ERC claim reviewers. And that's what they made it sound like. So they have an elite program of agents reviewing these claims meticulously and then going most likely after the big guns. I don't know, maybe by preparers, Right. And there's some companies that seem legitimate, like one of the Shark Tank guys in that Wall Street Journal article, Mr. Wonderful. He was backing up one of these ERC companies. So there's really big ones out there that claimed millions.
We all get the calls all day, every day. Yeah, so there's a lot of money to be made. Therefore, there's a lot of nefarious actors that are in the space as well that have no business being in there.
Correct.
Not at all. Like Luke says, they were selling timeshares, and now they're selling the credits and experts at
essentially,
it.
Essentially, before this, I mean, a lot of these shops, they were never touching IRS programs. They had no business really being in this business. And you look back, maybe they were selling timeshare a year ago, but now they converted from that over to an ERC professionals or ERC elite, right?
So that's an interesting point, because ultimately, even in a nefarious situation, this still falls back on the business owner. They're the end of the line. And the fact that there's potential criminal matters to be had, that would scare me as a business owner.
Yeah, they signed, and anyone who worked with one of these companies remember signing the claim. And it says like, under penalty of perjury,
this is valid.
Attest to this. This is legit. I've looked at this. And you can't really say, well, I didn't know, especially now that the IRS is giving so many opportunities of awareness. So correct. I don't think they're going to be
kind.
Yeah, I think they're going to say, hey, you snooze, you lose.
Agreed.
So bottom line is, if you have any inkling that, my claim might be off, it's probably a good time to have someone else review it.
As soon
Call that tax
as
professional
ASAP. Yes, run, do not walk.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, it's scary and very sad.
It's really disappointing.
but they have an opening to right the wrong, like I said.
They do.
So this is the window. And I think this was a good chance for us to at least get this out there a little bit to kind of explain it, because I still see that there's a little bit of a mystery behind this program. And so that's why I thought this show would be very important, just to shed a little bit of light on it, to get some intel, and I guess also share public awareness of the urgency. Yeah. This isn't something where you sit on. So
no, this is not a test. Like this is 100% going to happen.
And you said it's in March is the deadline for this?
Yeah, March 22nd at 11:59 p.m. I believe Eastern time.
So mark your calendars.
Yes. No, seriously. Go to a tax professional as soon as possible. I tell people all the time, my family, everybody, like, beware, because they're coming.
Your phone must be ringing off the hook.
It is.
That's why
that is why it's on silent. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
You.
And Marty, thank you as well for joining us.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys. And we'll be back.